Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Minecraft Disney World, the series in which I visit the mcmagic.us server in Minecraft, which has completely recreated Walt Disney World, and I take a look at one attraction and talk a little bit about the history of the real thing. So this week we're going to be taking a look at the Universe of Energy pavilion at Epcot, also known as Ellen's Energy Adventure. It is a pavilion that opened up original day, October 1st, 1982. At the time, it was just called the Universe of Energy. It was one attraction. There wasn't much else in the pavilion. And then it later became known as Ellen's Energy Adventure. Now, just to start right off, taking a look at this building, it's really unique in its design. Now, here in Minecraft, they're using glass on the roof, but in the real Universe of Energy, it was itself an innovative building because on top of the roof were 80,000 photovoltaic solar cells. So basically solar panels on top of this roof. And that the power that those panels gathered actually was used to partially power the ride inside of it. So it was sort of practicing what it preached in a way. Now, the old ride, which ran from 1982 to 1996, was basically this very low-key, laid-back ride about energy. Starting from the sources of it, and it was mostly fossil fuels, and you'll sort of see why in a little bit. And then in 1996 it was closed and then reopened, and it was essentially the same theme, but it was given a new presentation, and it involved Ellen DeGeneres, who it was named after, Ellen's Energy Adventure, and it was also starring Bill Nye the Science Guy, and you had Alex Trebek from Jeopardy in there, and you had Jamie Lee Curtis. And the basic premise was that Ellen, who is neighbors with Bill Nye in New York, falls asleep and has a dream in which she's on Jeopardy with her roommate, her old roommate from college, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, and she basically loses pretty badly. And all the topics are on energy because Jamie Lee Curtis is a professor of energy. And so Ellen thinks that energy is stupid and not important, and she's a little bitter. And so Bill Nye in this dream takes her through the history of how we've discovered energy and how we harness energy and why energy is so important to us. And it actually starts out here in this room with a short film that plays. It sort of sets everything up, and then you go in here and you have these theater-style vehicles. And in here, it's quite short, but in the real thing, it's a large vehicle. I mean, these vehicles can seat across easily, probably 20 people more. 20 or more, yeah, without a doubt. And so you go in and you sit down and you're watching basically another movie that sets it up, and that would be on this screen right here. And it more or less plays out sort of like a movie would. Okay, so after those two films would end, the theater would actually turn, or I should say the vehicles in the theater would turn, and you would actually start to go through this diorama, which is called the Primeval Diorama. And it's the actual same diorama that was used from the original Universe of Energy. It's just sort of been updated for Ellen's Energy Adventure. And what they did was they put in a animatronic Ellen who's sort of lost in this prehistoric era with Bill Nye the Science Guy to show how fossil fuels sort of were created here. One minor thing they did do is they repainted the dinosaurs and made them much brighter, because the original Universe of Energy was sort of going for this stoic, realistic, and like humbling, theme, whereas Ellen's Energy Adventure was much more lighthearted, much more comedic, which sort of makes sense, right? Because Ellen's in it and she's a comedian. And it was given a new score, and they were given some new audio systems throughout the building, and new animatronics, stuff like that, just to sort of give it an upgrade, since at that point the ride was about 15 years old. Now, this part was actually pretty short. You would run through it pretty quickly, which just goes to show you how much of this ride is actually just film that you're watching. And this is a notably long ride. It's a 45-minute ride, which puts it on the longer end when it comes to Disney World attractions. The only other rides that really come close to that length are things like the Hollywood Studios Backlot Tour. But what's interesting is because it's broken up into these different films with the the pre-show and then the first show and then the diorama and then this post-show here, they are actually able to start a new show every 17 minutes. So they have this sort of rolling theater. And because that's sort of an important thing at Disney World, is how many people you can get through the ride on an hourly basis. Now, the ride was sponsored by ExxonMobil for 22 years, starting from 1982, and then it sort of dropped it in 2004. And so all references were removed. Now, of course, like I've said in previous episodes, you always see this sort of connection between the sponsor and the ride. For instance, you have Chevrolet and Test Track sort of make sense. ExxonMobil made sense with a ride about energy, although it's sort of changed over time because we don't necessarily look at oil as a positive form of energy these days. So that could perhaps be part of the reason why ExxonMobil dropped their sponsorship. In fact, the ride itself is very interesting because it does look at oil as in a positive light, because at that time, it's what we depended on the most. It's still what we depend on the most, right? But, we have this push today that we want to look more into solar and wind and, alternative and clean forms of energy. But back then we weren't so focused on that. And so that sort of gives this an interesting look. The other place you'd see something like that is on the ride on Norway. The boat ride on Norway has a scene in which you go by an oil rig, which I guess at the time was no big deal, and it shows off what Norway does, which I guess is offshore drilling. But today it seems very weird in a climate where, you see all this negative news about oil spills and stuff like that. And as always, the Imagineers are always looking for ways to sort of reference and pay homage to older rides. So some of the original footage from the original Universe of Energy was moved over, and it actually can be seen in the introduction film of Hall of Presidents. So if you go over and watch that ride, some of what you see there might actually be from the Universe of Energy. And that's just a quick look at the Universe of Energy, or Ellen's Energy Adventure at the Universe of Energy Pavilion here at Epcot in Future World. I know I say this with a lot of rides, but I say this with complete sincerity. This is one of my favorite rides at Epcot. In fact, after the recent refurbishment of Spaceship Earth, I would have to say that this is my favorite ride at Epcot, which may seem boring because it's not Soarin' or Mission Space, but I grew up with Bill Nye the Science Guy. I think Ellen's still hilarious and completely relevant, and I think that's what's amazing is that this thing was opened in 1996 and now it's 2013. Like, this is an ancient ride and it still feels relevant because they're people that, they're names that we know and they're still entertaining, and it didn't date itself, even though, they were using popular figures from the mid-90s. And I think it has a great message, which is that we need to focus on finding multiple forms of energy that we can harness and, focusing on how important energy is. And I think Epcot's embodiment was trying to teach through entertainment, and I think this ride does that. For some people, it is a 45-minute nap and an escape from the heat. I never look at it that way. I always love to go on this ride. And hopefully if you go to Disney World anytime soon, you will enjoy it as well. In any case, this has been Minecraft Disney. I do this every week. I pick an attraction. We take a look at the history. I hope you have a fantastic week. Whatever you're doing, make the most of it. And I hope to see you all next week for the next episode of Minecraft Disney World. Bye, everyone.